When we speak about the difference between the limitless cosmos and the restrictive framework of spacetime, we are really talking about two very different ways of understanding reality. On one hand, the cosmos represents everything that exists, all matter, all energy, all possibilities, all laws, and perhaps even all things we have not yet imagined. It is the totality of existence, without obvious borders or edges. On the other hand, spacetime is the specific structure through which this totality becomes accessible to us. It is the grid that orders events, positions objects, and sequences change. The cosmos may be vast beyond comprehension, but spacetime determines how that vastness is experienced, and that experience is far more limited than the whole itself. The idea of a limitless cosmos is not just poetic language. Modern cosmology strongly suggests that the universe, at the largest scales, may be infinite or at least unbounded. Observations show no clear center, no preferred direction, and no visible edge. Every time our instruments improve, the observable horizon expands, revealing more galaxies, more structures, more complexity. Even if the observable universe is finite, what lies beyond it may extend endlessly. Inflation theory, multiverse hypotheses, and quantum cosmology all point toward a reality far larger than what spacetime allows us to directly observe. The cosmos, in this sense, is not just big, it is open-ended. Spacetime, however, acts as a filter. It does not allow all of that cosmic reality to appear at once or be experienced freely. Instead, it slices reality into moments, locations, and causal chains. You can only be here, not everywhere. You can only be now, not across all times. This limitation is so deeply ingrained in daily life that it feels natural, even inevitable. Yet when compared to the apparent boundlessness of the cosmos, spacetime's role begins to look less like a neutral framework and more like a constraint that narrows an otherwise infinite reality into a very specific form. One way to understand this difference is through the concept of horizons. The cosmos may contain infinitely many galaxies, but spacetime imposes a cosmic horizon beyond which information can never reach us. Light from regions too far away will never arrive, no matter how long we wait, because the expansion of spacetime itself carries those regions away faster than light can travel toward us. This means that vast portions of the cosmos are permanently inaccessible, not because they do not exist, but because spacetime prevents any interaction with them. The cosmos is there, but spacetime locks the door. This restriction is not only spatial, it is also temporal. The cosmos, taken as a whole, might include all times at once, past, present, and future existing together as a complete structure. Many interpretations of physics, such as the block universe view, suggest exactly this. In that picture, spacetime is a four-dimensional object where every event already exists, laid out in its entirety. Yet conscious experience is confined to a thin slice moving along one direction of time. You remember the past, you anticipate the future, but you can only experience one moment at a time. The cosmos may contain the whole timeline, but spacetime enforces a strict experiential limitation. You live inside a single frame of it. This contrast becomes even clearer when we consider how laws of physics operate. The laws themselves appear universal, elegant, and mathematically simple. They seem to apply everywhere and everywhen, hinting at an underlying cosmic order that is not tied to any particular location or moment. But spacetime expresses these laws locally. Forces weaken with distance, signals decay over time, and interactions require proximity. The laws may be cosmic in scope, but their effects are delivered through spacetime in a controlled, limited manner. Again, the cosmos suggests openness, while spacetime enforces constraint. Another important aspect of this difference lies in the nature of possibility. The cosmos may allow an enormous range of possible states, configurations, and histories. Quantum theory, in particular, suggests that at a fundamental level, reality explores many possibilities simultaneously. Yet spacetime forces a selection. Only one outcome is experienced in a given location and moment. Possibilities collapse into actualities, and alternative paths become inaccessible. From a cosmic perspective, all these possibilities may still exist in some form. From within spacetime, however, you are locked into a single sequence of events. The richness of the cosmos is reduced to a narrow path through it. The restrictive nature of spacetime also shapes how meaning and value are constructed. Because we are limited to finite lifetimes, finite resources, and finite perspectives, we assign importance to moments, choices, and relationships. Scarcity creates urgency. If spacetime did not limit us, if we could revisit moments or exist in multiple places at once, the structure of meaning would be entirely different. The cosmos might not impose such scarcity, but spacetime does. It compresses infinity into finitude, turning endless potential into fleeting experience. Even our understanding of causality reflects this divide. In everyday thinking, causes precede effects, and influence travels through space over time. This makes sense within spacetime, where ordering and separation are fundamental. But at deeper levels of physics, this simple picture begins to break down. Quantum correlations appear that do not respect classical notions of cause and effect tied to spacetime separation. These phenomena hint that the cosmos may operate on principles that are not fully captured by spacetime-based reasoning. Spacetime, then, may be a kind of simplified interface, hiding deeper connections beneath its orderly surface. The metaphor of spacetime as a prison does not mean it is malicious or artificial in a simple sense. Rather, it highlights how spacetime confines perspective. You cannot step outside it to see the cosmos whole. You cannot compare multiple timelines directly. You cannot experience the full range of cosmic possibility. Everything you know is mediated by position and moment. The cosmos may be limitless in structure, content, and potential, but spacetime ensures that any observer encounters only a tiny fragment of that totality. This becomes particularly striking when considering scale. The cosmos spans extremes far beyond human intuition, from quantum fluctuations smaller than atoms to structures larger than superclusters of galaxies. Spacetime allows these scales to exist, but it does not allow a single observer to inhabit them all. You are locked into a narrow band of scale where your body, senses, and tools function. The cosmos may contain realities at scales where time behaves differently, space loses meaning, or familiar concepts dissolve entirely. Spacetime, as you experience it, keeps you confined to a middle ground where survival is possible but comprehension is limited. Importantly, the difference between the cosmos and spacetime also affects how we think about truth. Statements about the cosmos aim at universality, what is true everywhere always and without exception. Statements about spacetime are contextual, true here, now under these conditions. Much of human knowledge is spacetime bound. It depends on measurements made at specific locations and times. Yet we intuitively seek cosmic truth, laws and principles that transcend any particular situation. This tension reflects the deeper contrast between an unlimited whole and a restrictive framework. From this perspective, spacetime can be seen as both enabling and limiting. Without it, there would be no stable structures, no persistent objects, no memory, no history. But because of it, there is also separation, delay, decay, and loss. The cosmos might be timeless in its totality, but spacetime introduces time as a force that erodes, ages, and ends. The cosmos might be unified, but spacetime introduces distance and division. The price of order is confinement. Understanding the difference between the limitless cosmos and the restrictive framework of spacetime does not require rejecting physics or embracing mysticism. It simply requires recognizing that the way reality appears to us may not be the way it is in its entirety. Spacetime may be a local rulebook, a necessary condition for experience, rather than the ultimate nature of existence. The cosmos, in contrast, may be the full story, most of which remains hidden behind the constraints that spacetime imposes. In this light, human curiosity itself can be seen as a response to confinement. We build telescopes, accelerators, and theories not just to accumulate facts, but to push against the boundaries spacetime places on us. Every discovery that reveals something beyond immediate experience feels liberating because it briefly widens the window. Yet the window never disappears. No matter how much we learn, we remain inside spacetime, interpreting a limitless cosmos through a restrictive frame. This is why the difference between the cosmos and spacetime matters so deeply. It reminds us that the limits we experience may not be the limits of reality itself. The walls we feel may belong to the framework of perception, not to existence as a whole. The cosmos may be far more open, interconnected, and vast than spacetime allows us to live. Recognizing this does not break the prison, but it changes how we understand it. We begin to see spacetime not as the universe itself, but as the narrow corridor through which an infinite cosmos is forced to pass, one moment and one location at a time. When the difference between the limitless cosmos and the restrictive framework of spacetime is examined more deeply, it becomes clear that spacetime does not merely describe where things are and when they happen, but actively governs how reality can unfold. The cosmos, understood as the totality of existence, does not appear to require positions or moments in the way spacetime does. Existence itself does not announce that it must be divided into seconds, meters, coordinates, or directions. These divisions arise from spacetime, not necessarily from the cosmos itself. In that sense, spacetime is not reality's origin, but its organizing cage. Consider how absolute the rules of spacetime are in daily life. You cannot be in two places at once. You cannot experience two different moments simultaneously. You cannot step outside the sequence of cause and effect. These constraints feel so natural that questioning them sounds meaningless, yet physics itself suggests that these rules may not apply universally. At the deepest levels of reality, the equations describing the cosmos often do not require time in the way we experience it. Some formulations of quantum gravity even remove time entirely from their fundamental description. This implies something profound. Spacetime might not be the foundation of the cosmos, but a surface-level phenomenon that emerges under certain conditions. The cosmos, when viewed through this lens, resembles a vast, interconnected whole where separation is not fundamental. Spacetime introduces separation by carving reality into distinct locations and ordered moments. Without spacetime, there may be relations, patterns, and structures, but not distances in the familiar sense. Everything could be connected in ways that spacetime later stretches apart. What we call far away might be a feature of spacetime geometry rather than a reflection of true cosmic separation. If this is the case, then spacetime acts as a mechanism that enforces distance and delay, effectively isolating parts of the cosmos from one another. This enforced isolation has enormous consequences for how life and intelligence develop. Because information cannot travel instantly, beings like us evolve in partial ignorance. We must infer, predict, and guess. We build models of the world because spacetime prevents us from accessing the whole directly. The cosmos may contain all answers, but spacetime ensures that those answers arrive slowly, fragment by fragment, or not at all. Knowledge becomes a process instead of a possession. Uncertainty becomes a permanent condition of existence. Even the concept of identity is shaped by spacetime's restrictions. You experience yourself as a continuous being because your memories are arranged along a timeline. Your sense of self depends on persistence through time. But if the cosmos is not fundamentally temporal, then identity might not be something that flows from moment to moment. Instead, it might be a fixed structure viewed sequentially due to spacetime's constraints. From a cosmic perspective, your entire life could exist as a complete pattern, while spacetime forces you to experience it frame by frame. In this sense, spacetime imprisons not only your movement, but your awareness of who you are. The idea that the cosmos is limitless also applies to potential realities. Many modern theories suggest that the cosmos may include multiple universes, alternative histories, or branching possibilities. These are not constrained by a single spacetime framework, but may exist in a broader structure where spacetime is just one local configuration among many. If true, then our spacetime is a specific environment with specific rules, much like a habitat. Life within it adapts to those rules and often mistakes them for universal truths. The cosmos, meanwhile, may host forms of existence that are not bound by time flowing forward or space stretching outward. Spacetime's restrictive nature becomes especially evident when we confront extremes. Near the speed of light, time slows. Near massive objects, space warps. At singularities, the known laws of spacetime break down entirely. These breakdowns suggest that spacetime is not infinitely robust. It has limits, edges where it ceases to function coherently. The cosmos, however, does not appear to end at these points. Instead, spacetime fails to describe what is happening. This strongly suggests that spacetime is a tool, not the ultimate substance of reality. And like any tool, it has a domain beyond which it no longer applies. There is also a psychological dimension to spacetime's confinement. Humans experience anxiety, regret, and fear largely because time is irreversible. You cannot undo mistakes or revisit moments except in memory. This creates a constant pressure to act correctly in the present, knowing it will soon be unreachable. The cosmos itself does not seem to care about this urgency. Stars are born and die over billions of years. Galaxies collide and merge without haste. The drama of irreversibility belongs to spacetime-bound experience, not necessarily to cosmic existence as a whole. In this way, spacetime imposes emotional constraints alongside physical ones. The sense of progress is another illusion created by spacetime. We feel that history moves forward, that humanity advances from ignorance to knowledge. Yet, from a cosmic viewpoint, all these stages may coexist. What we call progress may simply be our traversal of a fixed structure. The cosmos might not be improving or declining, it might simply be. Spacetime forces us to interpret this static totality as a dynamic story. This storytelling aspect of existence gives meaning, but it also hides the possibility that nothing is truly changing at the deepest level. Language itself reflects spacetime's grip. We speak in tenses. We describe objects as being her or their. Our grammar encodes the assumptions of spacetime so deeply that imagining alternatives becomes extremely difficult. Even when we try to talk about timeless or spaceless realities, we are forced to use metaphors drawn from time and space. This linguistic limitation mirrors the broader cognitive prison spacetime creates. The cosmos may be conceptually reachable, but spacetime, bound minds struggle to articulate it without distortion. Yet within this prison there are cracks. Mathematics is one of them. Mathematical truths do not age. A theorem proven thousands of years ago remains true regardless of time or place. This timeless quality suggests access to something beyond spacetime constraints. When physicists write equations that apply everywhere in the universe, they are reaching toward the cosmos itself, not just local spacetime events. These equations hint at a deeper order that does not flow or move, but simply exists. In this sense, mathematics offers a partial escape from spacetime's limitations, even if only intellectually. Another crack appears in moments of deep reflection, creativity, or insight, when you lose track of time, when past and future fade and only awareness remains. The grip of spacetime loosens subjectively. These experiences do not break physical laws, but they reveal how much of spacetime's prison is psychological. The cosmos may still be unreachable physically, but the mind can momentarily step outside the usual temporal narrative. Such moments suggest that spacetime's confinement is not absolute at every level of experience. Still, it is important to recognize that spacetime's restrictive role is not purely negative. Without it, there would be no stable sequences, no learning, no memory. Meaning itself might dissolve without the contrast provided by limitation. A limitless cosmos experienced without structure might be overwhelming, even incomprehensible. Spacetime, by constraining experience, makes life possible. The prison also serves as a shelter, but acknowledging its protective role does not negate its confining nature. Protection and restriction often come together. The key insight is that the cosmos does not appear to be limited in the same way spacetime is. The boundaries we encounter are boundaries of the framework we inhabit, not necessarily boundaries of existence itself. When we mistake spacetime for the cosmos, we shrink reality to the size of our experience. When we distinguish between them, reality expands again. The universe stops being a closed box and becomes a window onto something much larger. This distinction changes how we interpret scientific discovery. Each time physics reveals a phenomenon that does not fit comfortably within spacetime, it is not a failure of science, but a hint that we are pressing against the bars of the prison. Dark matter, dark energy, quantum non-locality, and the nature of time itself all point toward aspects of the cosmos that spacetime cannot fully explain. These mysteries are not signs of ignorance alone, they are signs of limitation built into the framework we use to understand reality. Ultimately, the difference between the limitless cosmos and the restrictive framework of spacetime invites humility. It reminds us that our deepest intuitions are shaped by the conditions of our existence, not by the full nature of reality. What feels absolute may be local. What feels fundamental may be emergent. The cosmos may be far more open than spacetime allows us to experience, and spacetime may be just one way that infinite existence becomes temporarily livable. To live within spacetime is to live inside a narrow corridor carved through an immense structure. We walk that corridor step by step, unable to turn around or see the whole, yet the walls of the corridor are not the walls of reality itself. Beyond them may lie a cosmos without the constraints of here and now, before and after. Recognizing this does not free us from spacetime, but it reframes our condition. We are not trapped in a small universe. We are participants in an unlimited cosmos, experiencing it through a framework that both reveals and conceals, confines and enables, imprisons and makes life possible at the same time. Human perception does not encounter reality directly. It never has. Every sight, sound, thought, and feeling is processed through layers of limitation imposed by spacetime. When we speak about how spacetime shapes limits and filters all human perception, we are not talking only about physics in an abstract sense. We are talking about the very structure of experience itself. What you perceive as reality is not the cosmos in its fullness, but a carefully constrained slice of it, shaped by where you are, when you are, and how information can reach you. The first and most obvious limitation spacetime places on perception is locality. You only perceive what happens within a very narrow region of space around your body. Even then, perception depends on signals that must travel across space to reach you. Light reflects off objects and enters your eyes. Sound waves vibrate the air and reach your ears. Touch requires direct contact. Smell and taste rely on particles moving through space to interact with receptors. Every sense depends on transmission through space, and transmission through space takes time. This means perception is always delayed. You never see the present moment as it is, you see the past, however slightly delayed it may be. This delay is not a technical inconvenience, it is fundamental. Spacetime enforces a maximum speed at which information can travel. No signal can exceed it. Because of this, perception is always retrospective. When you look at the sun, you see it as it was over 8 minutes ago. When you look at distant galaxies, you see them as they were millions or even billions of years in the past. On a cosmic scale, perception becomes archaeology. You are surrounded by history, not immediacy. The cosmos may exist in its fullness now, but spacetime ensures that you only ever encounter echoes. Time itself imposes an even deeper filter. Human consciousness experiences time as a flowing sequence: past, present, future. This sequence feels natural, but it is not necessarily how reality is structured at its deepest level. Physics suggests that time may not flow at all in the fundamental equations. Instead, the sensation of flow arises from how spacetime arranges events and how the brain processes them. Perception stitches together snapshots into a continuous narrative, creating the illusion of motion and change. Without spacetime's ordering of events, this narrative would collapse. Memory plays a critical role in this process. You do not perceive the present alone, you perceive it against a backdrop of remembered past moments. But memory itself is constrained by spacetime. It can only record what has already occurred along your personal timeline. You cannot remember the future, even if it exists in some deeper cosmic sense. This asymmetry shapes perception profoundly. The past feels fixed, the future feels open, and the present feels fleeting. These feelings are not properties of the cosmos, they are properties of perception under spacetime constraints. Spacetime also filters perception by scale. The human sensory system evolved to function within a narrow band of sizes, distances, and durations. You cannot directly perceive atomic processes or galactic motions. An atom is too small, a galaxy too vast, a nanosecond too brief, a billion years too long, yet all of these scales are part of the cosmos. Spacetime allows them to exist, but it does not allow you to experience them directly. Instruments extend perception, but even they are limited by spacetime's rules. Every measurement still requires interaction, signal transmission, and time. Because of this, perception is always partial. You do not see the electromagnetic spectrum as it truly is, you see only a tiny sliver of it. You do not hear all vibrations, you hear only those within a narrow frequency range. You do not feel most forces acting on your body, gravity itself is barely sensed directly. The cosmos is rich with information, but spacetime, combined with biological limitation, filters most of it out. What remains is a simplified, survival-oriented version of reality. This filtering has consequences for how truth is understood. Humans tend to assume that what they perceive is what exists. But spacetime ensures that perception is incomplete and distorted. Objects appear solid, yet they are mostly empty space. Motion appears smooth, yet at microscopic scales it may be discontinuous. Causes appear local, yet deeper connections may exist beyond spacetime separation. Perception presents a coherent story, but coherence does not guarantee completeness. The brain itself is a spacetime-bound organ. Neural signals travel at finite speeds. Thoughts take time to form. Decisions unfold over milliseconds and seconds. Even awareness is delayed. By the time you become conscious of an event, it has already happened. Experiments in neuroscience suggest that the brain initiates actions before conscious awareness registers the decision. Spacetime introduces lag not only in sensory perception, but in self-perception. You experience yourself slightly after you have already acted. This delay creates the sense of agency and continuity, but it also reveals how constrained perception truly is. You feel like a unified self moving through time, yet that self is assembled moment by moment from delayed information. The cosmos does not announce that it must be experienced this way. This is how spacetime, coupled with biological processing, presents it to you. The result is a perception of reality that feels immediate and personal, but is actually indirect and constructed. Spacetime also shapes perception by enforcing separation between observers. You cannot directly access another person's experiences. You infer them through communication, behavior, and shared environments. This separation is spatial and temporal. Words take time to travel. Gestures take time to be seen. Misunderstandings arise because perception is filtered differently for each observer, depending on position, motion, and history. The cosmos may be unified at a fundamental level, but spacetime fractures that unity into individual perspectives. Relativity makes this even more striking. According to modern physics, different observers moving at different speeds or located in different gravitational fields experience time differently. What is simultaneous for one observer is not simultaneous for another. This means there is no single, universal "no" that everyone shares. Perception of the present depends on motion and location. The cosmos does not privilege one frame of reference over another, but spacetime ensures that perception is always tied to a specific frame. Reality becomes relative to perspective. This relativity undermines the idea of an objective, shared experience of the world. There may be objective laws governing the cosmos, but perception of events is always local and conditional. Two observers can disagree about the order of events and both be correct within their own spacetime frames. This is not a philosophical trick, it is a physical fact. Spacetime does not just limit perception, it customizes it for each observer. The concept of causality is another filter imposed by spacetime. Humans perceive causes as preceding effects, linked by chains of interaction through space and time. This makes sense within spacetime, where signals propagate at finite speeds. But deeper physical theories suggest that this causal structure may not be fundamental. Quantum phenomena exhibit correlations that do not fit neatly into spacetime-based cause and effect narratives. Yet perception insists on causal stories because spacetime enforces them at the level of experience. You perceive a world of actions and reactions, not a web of timeless correlations. Emotion and meaning are also shaped by spacetime. Fear arises from anticipating future harm. Regret arises from remembering past actions. Hope depends on imagined future outcomes. All of these emotional states depend on time being experienced as a one-way flow. If perception were not temporally ordered, these emotions would lose their structure. The cosmos itself does not require fear or hope, but spacetime-bound perception does. In this way, spacetime filters not only information but value. Even the sense of beauty is affected. A sunset is beautiful because it is transient. Music is beautiful because it unfolds over time. Stories are meaningful because they have beginnings, middles, and ends. These aesthetic experiences depend on spacetime's structure. Without temporal progression, there would be no melody, only a static pattern. Without spatial extension, there would be no form, only abstraction. Spacetime shapes not just what you see, but what you find meaningful. Importantly, perception does not merely receive spacetime's constraints, it adapts to them. Over evolutionary time, organisms develop senses tuned to the spacetime environment they inhabit. This tuning favors survival, not truth in an absolute sense. You perceive a world of solid objects and continuous motion because that is useful, not because it is fundamentally accurate. The cosmos may be vastly different at deeper levels, but spacetime ensures that perception remains practical rather than complete. This adaptive filtering explains why many aspects of modern physics feel counterintuitive. Concepts like curved spacetime, time dilation, quantum superposition, and non-locality clash with everyday perception because everyday perception evolved under spacetime conditions that hide these features. Spacetime presents itself as flat, uniform, and intuitive at human scales, masking its deeper complexity. Perception accepts this simplified version and resists alternatives. Technology can partially lift these filters, but never remove them entirely. Telescopes reveal distant galaxies, microscopes reveal cells and atoms, clocks measure tiny intervals. Yet every technological extension still operates within spacetime. Signals still travel at finite speeds. Measurements still occur at specific locations and times. Data still arrives delayed and incomplete. Technology widens the window, but the frame remains. Language further reinforces spacetime's grip on perception. Words are arranged sequentially. Sentences unfold over time. Descriptions rely on spatial metaphors. Even abstract ideas are expressed using terms like before, after, near, and far. This linguistic structure mirrors spacetime's organization, making it difficult to even imagine realities that do not conform to it. Perception and communication become locked into the same framework. When all of this is taken together, a clear picture emerges. Human perception is not a neutral observer of the cosmos. It is a spacetime-bound process that selects, delays, simplifies, and orders information in very specific ways. The cosmos may be limitless, but perception is narrow. The cosmos may be timeless in its totality, but perception is trapped in a flowing present. The cosmos may be deeply interconnected, but perception experiences separation and distance. Understanding this does not diminish human experience, it contextualizes it. It reveals that what feels immediate and complete is actually partial and mediated. The world you experience is not the cosmos itself, but a version of it shaped by spacetime into a form your mind can handle. This realization opens the possibility that reality extends far beyond what perception allows, and that spacetime, rather than being the ultimate stage of existence, is the lens that both reveals and distorts the infinite cosmos beyond it. When the shaping role of spacetime on human perception is followed to its deepest consequences, it becomes clear that perception is not simply limited in quantity, but structured in form. Spacetime does not only decide how much of reality you can access, it decides the very way reality must appear to you. Perception is formatted by spacetime long before conscious thought begins. By the time you say, "I see," "I hear," or "I understand," spacetime has already done its filtering work. One of the most powerful ways spacetime shapes perception is by enforcing sequence. Experience must arrive in order. One sensation follows another. One thought replaces the previous one. This sequencing creates the impression of flow, movement, and narrative. Yet sequence is not necessarily a property of the cosmos itself. It may be a property of how spacetime delivers information to conscious systems. If the cosmos exists as a complete structure, perception reduces that structure to a moving line through it. You do not encounter reality all at once, you encounter it as a story being told to you frame by frame. This storytelling effect makes perception feel meaningful, but it also hides alternatives. Because everything arrives in sequence, you assume sequence is fundamental, you assume events must happen one after another, you assume causes must precede effects, you assume the past is gone and the future is open. These assumptions feel self-evident, yet physics repeatedly suggests they may be approximations rather than truths. Spacetime enforces these assumptions at the level of experience, making it extremely difficult to imagine existence without them. Perception is also shaped by spacetime through stability. Objects appear persistent. A chair remains a chair. A person remains the same person from moment to moment. This persistence arises because spacetime allows patterns to repeat across time. Yet at a deeper level, matter is in constant motion. Particles appear and disappear. Fields fluctuate. What perception calls the same object is actually a continuously changing process stabilized by spacetime's structure. Perception smooths this change into sameness because stability is necessary for recognition and survival. This smoothing creates the illusion of solid reality. You feel surrounded by durable things, yet durability is not absolute. It is conditional. It depends on spacetime maintaining certain relationships over time. When those relationships break down, as in decay, destruction, or extreme conditions, the illusion collapses. Perception is not wrong in presenting stability, but it is incomplete. It shows you the version of reality that spacetime allows to persist long enough to be noticed. Another crucial filter is simultaneity. You feel as if the world shares a common present moment with you. It feels obvious that no is universal. But spacetime denies this. There is no single present that all observers share. What is happening, no, for you is not happening, no, for someone moving relative to you, or located in a different gravitational field. Perception ignores this complexity because it must. A shared present is psychologically necessary, even if it is physically false. Spacetime allows multiple presents to exist, but perception collapses them into one. This collapse has deep implications for social reality. Coordination, communication, and cooperation depend on the illusion of a shared now. Conversations, relationships, and societies function because spacetime, bound perception simplifies temporal reality into something manageable. The cosmos does not guarantee such simplicity. Spacetime enables it locally, and perception takes advantage of it. The result is a social world built on approximations that feel absolute. Perception is further shaped by spacetime through irreversibility. You cannot perceive time flowing backward. You cannot experience an effect before its cause. This one-way structure gives perception direction. It creates anticipation, memory, learning, and regret. But irreversibility may not be fundamental to the cosmos. It may arise from statistical and thermodynamic conditions within spacetime. Perception treats it as an unbreakable law because, within lived experience it is. This has psychological consequences. Anxiety exists because the future is unknown. Nostalgia exists because the past cannot be revisited. Motivation exists because time feels scarce. These emotional structures depend on spacetime's arrow. If perception were not temporally constrained, these emotions would not take the same form. The cosmos itself may not experience urgency, but spacetime-bound perception does. Emotion becomes another layer of filtering, Reinforcing spacetime's prison from the inside, spacetime also shapes perception by enforcing embodiment. You perceive from a body located at a specific point in space. Your perspective is anchored. You cannot see behind your head without turning. You cannot feel what another body feels without mediation. This anchoring creates a sense of self as something located here, looking out at a world there. The cosmos may not be divided into inner and outer in this way, but spacetime ensures that perception is. This bodily anchoring reinforces separation. You experience yourself as distinct from the environment. Objects appear external. Other beings appear separate. Yet physics suggests that at fundamental levels, boundaries are less clear. Fields interpenetrate. Particles are excitations of underlying structures. The cosmos may be deeply relational, but spacetime-bound perception insists on division. This insistence shapes identity, ownership, and conflict. What feels like a natural separation may be a perceptual artifact. Dreams, imagination, and memory offer clues about how perception loosens when spacetime constraints weaken. In dreams, time compresses, expands, or loses order entirely. Locations shift without movement. Causes and effects blur. Yet the experience remains subjectively real. This shows that perception does not require strict spacetime consistency to function. It requires coherence of some kind, but not necessarily physical coherence. The waking world feels more stable because spacetime enforces stricter rules, not because it is inherently more real. Imagination allows perception to simulate futures and pasts, but only imperfectly. You cannot imagine a future you have already experienced. You cannot imagine a past you do not remember without constructing it from fragments. Spacetime bounds imagination just as it bounds perception. You can think beyond the present, but you cannot escape the sequence entirely. Even imagination unfolds in time, one thought replacing another. Scientific instruments reveal another aspect of spacetime's filtering role. Measurements do not reveal reality directly, they register interactions. An instrument must interact with what it measures, and that interaction occurs in spacetime. This means observation always changes what is observed, at least slightly. At quantum scales, this effect becomes unavoidable. Perception, extended through instruments, encounters the limits of spacetime not as abstract ideas, but as physical barriers to knowledge. This is why uncertainty appears not only as ignorance, but as a fundamental feature of observation. You cannot know everything about a system at once because spacetime restricts how information can be gathered. Perception demands trade-offs. Precision in one dimension requires loss in another. The cosmos may contain complete information, but spacetime prevents any observer from accessing it all simultaneously. Cultural perception is also shaped by spacetime. Societies develop calendars, clocks, maps, and histories to manage spacetime constraints. These tools shape how people think about identity, progress, and purpose. Civilizations rise and fall because spacetime enforces finitude. Empires cannot exist everywhere at once. Traditions cannot persist unchanged forever. The cosmos may be limitless, but culture is spacetime bound, and perception internalizes that limitation. Even morality is affected. Responsibility depends on timing, guilt depends on memory, intention depends on anticipation. All moral concepts rely on spacetime structured perception. A timeless being would not judge actions the way humans do. Ethics emerges from the conditions of limited perception, not from cosmic absolutes. This does not make morality meaningless, but it shows how deeply spacetime shapes values. When perception is examined this way, it becomes clear that spacetime is not just an external prison, it is an internal one. It shapes how you think, feel, remember, hope, and fear. You do not merely live in spacetime, spacetime lives in you. Its structure is mirrored in your mind. The cosmos may be vast and open, but perception is trained to navigate a narrow corridor through it. Yet awareness of this filtering changes perception itself. When you realize that what you experience is not the whole, curiosity replaces certainty. Dogma weakens, openness grows. You begin to treat perceptions as perspectives rather than truths. This shift does not free you from spacetime, but it loosens its psychological grip. The prison remains, but you recognize its walls as structural, not ultimate. In this recognition, perception becomes more flexible. You become less attached to immediacy, less convinced that the present moment defines all that exists. You begin to sense that reality may be richer than what appears. This sense does not come from mystical escape, but from intellectual humility. Spacetime limits perception, but it also reveals its own limitations through science, reflection, and experience. Ultimately, to say that spacetime shapes, limits, and filters all human perception is to say that perception is not the measure of reality. It is a survival-oriented interface designed for life within a specific framework. The cosmos may be limitless, interconnected, and complete, but perception experiences it as fragmented, delayed, and partial. Understanding this does not diminish experience, it deepens it. It reminds you that beyond what you see, beyond what you feel, beyond what you can imagine, there may exist a reality far greater than spacetime allows you to perceive, waiting beyond the filters that shape your world. Infinity is a concept that appears natural when we think about the cosmos, yet feels completely alien when we examine our own experience. The universe seems to invite infinity at every turn. Space stretches without visible edge, numbers continue without end, time extends far beyond human scales, and possibilities multiply beyond counting. In contrast, human life is defined by limits. You are born, you age, you die. You can only be in one place at a time. You can only remember so much, imagine so much, endure so much. This contrast raises a deep question. Why does infinity seem to belong so comfortably to the cosmos, while remaining inaccessible to direct experience? At the cosmic level, infinity emerges naturally from the way physical laws are expressed. Mathematics, which underlies our best descriptions of reality, allows infinite sequences, infinite sets, and unbounded continua. When physicists model space, they often find no reason to impose an edge. The equations work just as well if space extends forever. When they model time, the laws do not demand a beginning or an end. Those boundaries are imposed by specific cosmological scenarios, not by time itself. In this sense, infinity is not an exotic add-on. It is the default state of the equations that describe the cosmos. The cosmos also displays infinity through scale. No matter how large a structure you observe, you can always imagine something larger. Galaxies form clusters, clusters form superclusters, and beyond that lie vast cosmic filaments and voids. At the opposite extreme, matter divides into atoms, atoms into subatomic particles, and those particles into fields and fluctuations. Each time science probes deeper, new layers appear. Infinity here does not necessarily mean, literally endless, in a naive sense, but it does mean unbounded by human intuition. There is no natural stopping point that experience can reach and declare final, yet when you turn inward, infinity disappears. Experience is always finite. A moment has a beginning and an end. Attention can only hold so much information. Consciousness itself flickers, sleeps, forgets, and fades. Even when you try to imagine infinity, you do so by extending finite steps, one more number, one more second, one more distance. Infinity is never grasped directly. It is approached, never arrived at. This gap between cosmic infinity and experiential finitude is not accidental. It is produced by the structure of spacetime and by the biological limits of perception. Time is the first major barrier. Experience unfolds sequentially. You encounter one moment, then the next, then the next. No matter how long you live, you only experience a finite number of moments. Even if time itself were infinite, your path through it would not be. Infinity may exist as a property of the whole timeline, but experience is confined to a single trajectory through it. You cannot step outside that trajectory to see time in its entirety. Infinity exists in the structure, not in the traversal. Space imposes a similar limitation. The cosmos may extend without bound, but you occupy a single location at any given moment. Movement through space takes time, energy, and effort. You cannot experience infinite distance, because distance must be crossed sequentially. Even imagining being everywhere at once breaks down, because imagination itself unfolds in time. Infinity in space may exist as a property of the whole, but experience reduces it to a narrow path. Memory further constrains infinity. You cannot remember infinitely many events. Memory fades, compresses, and distorts. To function, the brain must discard information. An infinite memory would be paralyzing. Experience requires forgetting. This necessity places a hard limit on how much of reality can be carried forward. Even if the cosmos preserves everything, experience does not. Infinity may exist objectively, but subjectively it must be filtered into manageable fragments. Language also plays a role in this divide. Infinity is a word, a symbol, a concept. It allows you to point toward something that cannot be directly experienced. When you say infinite, you are not describing a sensation, you are describing a rule. There is no final boundary. This abstraction belongs naturally to mathematics and cosmology, but it resists embodiment. Experience deals in qualities, durations, and magnitudes that can be compared. Infinity cannot be compared in this way. It does not fit into the grammar of experience. The laws of physics themselves suggest that infinity is not meant to be experienced locally. Whenever infinities appear in calculations at specific points, such as infinite density or infinite energy, physicists treat them as signs that the theory has broken down in that regime. These infinities signal limits of description, not physical experiences. This reinforces the idea that infinity belongs to the global structure of the cosmos, not to local, spacetime-bound experience. The cosmos may allow infinity as a whole, but spacetime prevents it from manifesting directly in lived reality. Human psychology adds another layer. Experience requires contrast. Pleasure is defined by relief from pain, light by darkness, sound by silence. Infinity offers no contrast. An infinite duration would not feel long, it would feel meaningless. An infinite space would not feel vast, it would feel undefined. Meaning emerges from limits. This is why human experience is structured around beginnings and endings. Infinity, while conceptually powerful, is experientially empty. This does not mean infinity is unreal. It means it exists at a different level of reality than experience. Infinity belongs to structure, not to sensation. It is a property of totality, not of perspective. The cosmos taken as a whole may contain infinite space, infinite time, or infinite possibilities. But experience is always perspectival. It is always, from somewhere, and, for some duration. Perspective collapses infinity into finitude by necessity. Spacetime enforces this collapse. It delivers reality one slice at a time. Each slice is finite. No matter how many slices exist overall, experience only encounters them sequentially. Infinity, if it exists, is distributed across slices, not contained within any one of them. From within spacetime, infinity becomes an idea rather than a fact. It is inferred, not felt. Even when humans seek infinity through art, religion, or philosophy, they do so by gesturing beyond experience. A cathedral points upward, a chant repeats, a story stretches across generations. These are symbolic attempts to touch infinity, not literal encounters. They acknowledge the limit even as they reach beyond it. Infinity remains something that surrounds experience, not something contained within it. The cosmos, by contrast, does not require experience to exist. It does not need to remember, to feel urgency, or to make meaning. It can be infinite without contradiction. Experience cannot. Experience must be selective, finite, and structured, or it collapses. In this sense, the absence of infinity in experience is not a flaw, it is a condition of existence within spacetime. This difference also explains why infinity often feels unsettling. It threatens the frameworks that give experience coherence. If time were truly infinite in a way you could feel, motivation would dissolve. If space were truly infinite in a way you could inhabit, orientation would vanish. Spacetime protects experience by shielding it from infinity. The cosmos may be limitless, but spacetime acts as a mediator, translating that limitlessness into a form that can be lived. Understanding why infinity exists in the cosmos but not in experience changes how both are viewed. The cosmos stops being something that must fit into human intuition. experience stops being mistaken for the measure of reality. Infinity becomes what it truly is, a property of the whole that no part can fully contain. From within spacetime, infinity can be known only indirectly, through reason, mathematics, and imagination, never through direct encounter. This realization does not diminish human life, it gives it context. Finite experience within an infinite cosmos is not a contradiction, it is a relationship. The limits you feel are not evidence that reality is small, they are evidence that experience is local. Infinity exists, but it exists beyond the reach of any single perspective, including yours. Infinity becomes even more elusive when we examine how deeply spacetime enforces finitude at every level of lived reality. Even when the cosmos allows endless extension, spacetime insists on thresholds, durations, and boundaries for anything that can be experienced. This insistence is not accidental. Experience itself depends on limitation. To experience something is to distinguish it from something else, and distinction requires boundaries. Infinity, by definition, resists boundary. This is why infinity can exist as a property of the cosmos while remaining inaccessible to direct experience. One of the clearest ways this plays out is through attention. Attention is the gateway to experience, and attention is inherently finite. You cannot attend to infinitely many things at once. Even within a single moment, awareness selects a narrow subset of available information. The rest is ignored. This selectivity is not a weakness, it is a necessity. Without it, perception would be overwhelmed. Spacetime structures attention by presenting information sequentially and locally. Infinity, even if present in the cosmos, must be filtered down to something manageable before it can enter awareness. This filtering creates a paradox. The more you try to imagine infinity, the more you rely on finite processes. You picture endless space by imagining one region after another. You picture endless time by imagining moments stretching forward without end. But each imagined extension is still finite. Infinity never arrives as an experience, it remains an extrapolation. This shows that infinity, for a space-time-bound mind, is always an idea about experience, not an experience itself. Mathematics reveals this distinction clearly. In mathematics, infinity is well defined and rigorously handled. Infinite sets, limits, and continua are treated precisely. Yet even here, infinity is not something countered. It is defined by rules and relationships. You never count to infinity, you define what it means to never finish counting. This mirrors the situation in the cosmos. Infinity exists structurally, not sequentially. It is a property of the whole, not something revealed at the end of a process. Spacetime ensures that all processes are sequential. Events unfold one after another. Causes precede effects. Even simultaneous events are only approximately simultaneous, depending on the observer. This sequencing makes infinity unreachable. An infinite sequence cannot be completed by sequential traversal. No matter how long you continue, you are always at a finite point. This is why eternity, when imagined as endless time, is not something that can be lived. It is something that can only be conceived abstractly. This also explains why immortality, if understood as endless duration, is psychologically difficult to grasp. A finite lifespan has shape, it has urgency, it has meaning defined by scarcity. An infinite lifespan, experienced moment by moment, would not feel infinite from the inside. It would feel like a series of finite moments with no concluding context. The mind relies on endings to frame significance. Infinity removes the frame. Space-time-bound experience requires finitude to function coherently. The same applies to space. An infinite universe does not feel infinite to an observer within it. It feels local. You experience a room, a landscape, a horizon. Even if you travel, you encounter one place after another. Infinity does not present itself as a sensation of boundlessness. It remains a theoretical inference. Spacetime hides infinity behind horizons, distances, and limits of motion. The cosmos may have no edge, but spacetime ensures that no observer ever encounters no edgy as an experience. Physical theories reinforce this separation. Whenever infinities appear at specific points in spacetime, such as infinite curvature or infinite density, They signal the breakdown of the theory's applicability. These infinities are not places where experience could occur, they are places where spacetime itself fails to describe reality. This suggests that infinity belongs to the underlying structure of the cosmos, not to the spacetime framework that governs experience. Spacetime seems almost designed to exclude infinity from local manifestation. Biology aligns with this exclusion. Living systems require stability, cycles, and limits. Cells divide a finite number of times. Organisms require rest. Brains require sleep. Memory requires forgetting. An organism that experienced infinity directly would not function. It would lack the constraints necessary for decision, making, and adaptation. Spacetime provides those constraints by limiting duration, scale, and access. Life is possible precisely because infinity is kept at a distance. Culture reflects this deeply. Human stories have beginnings and endings. Rituals have durations. Histories are divided into eras. Even when cultures speak of eternity or the infinite, they do so symbolically, not literally. Infinity becomes a metaphor for transcendence, not a description of lived reality. This symbolic use acknowledges the gap between cosmic infinity and experiential finitude. It accepts that infinity cannot be contained within the structures of daily life. Emotion also depends on finitude. Love matters because time is limited. Loss hurts because moments cannot be revisited. Achievement feels meaningful because opportunities pass. If experience were infinite in a literal sense, these emotional structures would collapse. There would be no urgency, no irreversibility, no stakes. Spacetime protects emotional meaning by ensuring that experience remains finite, even within an infinite cosmos. This protection, however, comes at a cost. The cost is existential tension. Humans sense infinity intellectually while living finitude emotionally. You can know that the cosmos may be endless, yet feel the sharp limits of your own existence. This tension drives philosophy, art, religion, and science. It is the engine of curiosity and longing. Spacetime creates the tension by separating what can be known from what can be lived. Attempts to dissolve this tension often involve confusing levels of reality. When infinity is forced into experience, it becomes either terrifying or meaningless. When finitude is projected onto the cosmos, reality becomes small and closed. A clearer understanding respects the distinction. Infinity belongs to the cosmos as a whole. Finitude belongs to experience within spacetime. Neither negates the other. Spacetime can therefore be understood as a translation mechanism. It translates an unlimited cosmos into a livable form. In doing so, it necessarily excludes direct access to infinity. What is translated is always finite, even if what is translated from is not. This is not a failure of spacetime, but its function. Without this translation, experience would be impossible. Recognizing this changes how infinity is approached. Instead of trying to experience infinity directly, which leads to confusion, infinity can be understood as context. It frames experience without entering it. It is the background against which finitude gains meaning. Your life is finite not because reality is small, but because experience must be. The cosmos can be limitless precisely because no single experience needs to contain it. In this light, the absence of infinity in experience is not a deprivation, it is a condition of clarity. Finitude allows focus. It allows significance. It allows identity. Infinity, meanwhile, remains what it truly is, the silent, unreachable totality that surrounds every moment without ever appearing inside it. Spacetime stands between the two, enforcing the boundary. So when we say that infinity exists in the cosmos but not in experience, we are not pointing to a contradiction, but to a division of roles. The cosmos holds what is unlimited. Spacetime shapes what can be lived. Experience unfolds within that shape, finite by necessity, meaningful because of it. Infinity does not need to be felt to be real. It only needs to exist as the larger context in which every finite moment quietly takes place. Gravity and time are usually presented as the forces that give the universe structure and coherence, but when examined closely, they function just as much as mechanisms of confinement as they do of order. Gravity binds matter together, fixes paths, and limits motion, while time imposes direction, decay, and irreversibility. Together, they ensure that nothing in spacetime is ever truly free. They do not merely describe how things move, they dictate where things can go and how long they can exist there. Gravity is often imagined as a gentle glue holding stars, planets, and galaxies together, but this image hides its restrictive nature. Every object with mass is locked into a gravitational relationship with everything else. You do not choose to stand on the ground, gravity holds you there. Planets do not wander freely through space, they are trapped in orbits. Stars do not drift at will, they circle galactic centers or collapse inward under their own weight. Gravity reduces the infinite possibilities of motion into narrow, predictable paths. It replaces freedom with inevitability. At cosmic scales, gravity creates some of the most extreme prisons imaginable. Black holes are the clearest example. They are regions where spacetime is curved so severely that escape becomes impossible. Once the boundary is crossed, all paths lead inward. Even light, the fastest thing known, is confined. Time itself slows and effectively ends from the perspective of an outside observer. These are not metaphorical prisons. They are literal confinements enforced by gravity's control over spacetime. Their existence shows that gravity is not simply a background force, it actively restricts what can happen. Even far from black holes, gravity quietly limits the cosmos. It creates horizons beyond which information cannot reach us. It locks galaxies into clusters and prevents them from dispersing freely. It ensures that matter clumps instead of spreading evenly. Without gravity, the universe might be a diffuse, featureless expanse. With gravity, it becomes structured, but that structure comes at the cost of confinement. Everything is held somewhere, bound to something else, unable to roam without constraint. Time complements gravity in this role. While gravity confines motion in space, time confines existence in duration. You cannot pause time, reverse it, or step outside it. You are carried forward regardless of desire or resistance. This forward motion is not a freedom, it is an obligation. Every moment that arrives immediately vanishes. You cannot remain in a moment you love or avoid a moment you fear. Time enforces progression without consent. This progression introduces decay. Systems wear down, energy spreads out, structures collapse, even stars burn their fuel and die. Time ensures that nothing lasts indefinitely within spacetime. This is often described as the arrow of time, driven by increasing entropy. From the inside, it feels like loss. From the outside, it is simply the rule. Time guarantees that all confined systems move toward dissolution. Freedom would imply the ability to persist or change direction at will. Together, gravity and time create closed narratives. An object forms, evolves, and ends. A life begins, unfolds, and stops. A civilization rises, peaks, and declines. These arcs feel natural because spacetime enforces them. They are not choices made by the cosmos, they are consequences of confinement. Gravity gathers matter into temporary structures. Time ensures those structures are temporary. This confinement also shapes ambition and imagination. You can dream of escape, but escape itself is constrained. Rockets must fight gravity. Travel must obey time. Even the fastest journey is still slow compared to cosmic distances. Horizons remain out of reach. The cosmos may be vast, but gravity and time make most of it inaccessible. They turn infinity into something that can be observed but not entered. Psychologically, gravity and time impose weight. Gravity anchors the body, time anchors the mind. You feel pulled downward physically and pushed forward mentally. Memory ties you to what has already happened. Anticipation pulls you toward what is coming. There is no neutral position where you can simply exist without direction. Time gives you a past you cannot revisit and a future you cannot skip. This directional pressure is a form of confinement that feels intimate and unavoidable. Importantly, neither gravity nor time appears to be fundamental in the deepest sense. Modern physics suggests both may emerge from more basic structures. Gravity may arise from geometry or information. Time may emerge from change or correlation rather than existing as a standalone entity. This makes their confining role even more striking. They may not be ultimate truths, yet they dominate experience completely. The prison may not be fundamental, but it is absolute for those inside it. This does not mean gravity and time are enemies. Without them, there would be no stable worlds, no memory, no continuity. But stability achieved through confinement is still confinement. Order replaces freedom. Predictability replaces openness. The cosmos may allow endless possibility, but gravity and time filter those possibilities down to a narrow, lived path. Seeing gravity and time as mechanisms of confinement changes perspective. Instead of viewing the universe as a place of limitless freedom, it becomes a place where freedom exists only in thought, not in motion or duration. You can imagine alternatives, but you must live one trajectory. Gravity and time ensure that. In this sense, spacetime is not a playground but a corridor. Gravity keeps you from leaving the corridor's walls. Time forces you to walk forward without stopping. The cosmos may extend endlessly beyond, but within spacetime, movement and existence are tightly controlled. Freedom, if it exists at all, does not exist as escape from gravity or time, but as understanding their role. To recognize their confining nature is not to despair, but to see clearly. The universe is not hostile, it is structured, and structure, by its nature, always limits. The idea that movement, progress, and causality are solid and objective features of reality feels unquestionable in everyday life. You move from one place to another, time passes, actions produce results, and life appears as a continuous chain of causes and effects. Yet, when examined through the deeper lens of spacetime, these experiences begin to look less like fundamental truths and more like carefully constructed illusions. They are not false, but they are not as absolute as they seem. They arise from how spacetime organizes reality, not necessarily from how reality exists at its deepest level. Movement appears obvious because spacetime presents the world as a sequence of changing positions. An object is here, then there. A person walks, a planet orbits, a galaxy drifts. But physics suggests that what we call movement may simply be the comparison of different positions within a larger structure. In certain interpretations, the entire history of an object exists as a complete path in spacetime. From this perspective, nothing truly moves. The path exists in its entirety, and what you experience as motion is your traversal along it. Movement feels real because experience is local and sequential, not because the cosmos itself is in constant motion. Progress operates in the same way. History feels like a story unfolding. Humanity advances, knowledge accumulates, societies evolve. But if all moments exist within spacetime, then progress is not the creation of something new, but the revelation of what is already there. What feels like becoming may simply be uncovering. The future feels open because you cannot access it, not because it does not exist. Spacetime restricts awareness to a moving present, creating the impression that reality is being built as you go. Causality reinforces this illusion. Causes seem to produce effects through time. You push, something moves. You decide, something happens. This sequence gives a sense of agency and control. Yet at deeper levels of physics, the strict ordering of cause and effect becomes less clear. Quantum phenomena show correlations that do not fit neatly into causal chains confined by spacetime. The equations governing these systems do not always privilege a direction of time. From a broader cosmic view, cause and effect may be relationships within a fixed structure rather than events generating one another. Spacetime makes causality feel unavoidable by enforcing order. Signals travel at finite speeds. Interactions require proximity. These rules ensure that events appear linked in time, but this linkage may be a feature of the framework, not of ultimate reality. Within spacetime, causality is mandatory. Outside it, causality as we know it may not apply. What we experience as a chain may, at a deeper level, be a pattern. The illusion of progress is strengthened by memory. You remember what has happened, and not what has not yet occurred. This asymmetry makes the past feel fixed and the future feel open, but this asymmetry belongs to perception, not necessarily to the cosmos. If the entire timeline exists, then memory is not evidence of creation, only of access. You experience progress because you gain access to moments in a particular order, not because reality itself is advancing. Even effort fits into this illusion. You work toward goals, you plan, you struggle. These actions feel like they bring the future into being. But from a space-time perspective, your efforts are part of the structure. The struggle and the outcome coexist as elements of the same pattern. This does not make effort meaningless, but it reframes it. Effort is experienced as causative because experience is confined to one direction through space-time. Language reinforces these illusions. Verbs encode action, tenses encode time, stories encode change. Every sentence assumes progression. It becomes difficult to think without assuming movement and causality. Yet these linguistic habits mirror space-time's structure. They are tools for navigating the prison, not proofs of its fundamental nature. Emotion depends on these illusions as well. Hope relies on the belief that the future can be shaped. Regret relies on the belief that the past could have been different. Motivation relies on the belief that effort changes outcomes. These beliefs function within space-time. They are necessary for life. But necessity does not equal fundamentality. The cosmos may not share these assumptions. Importantly, calling these aspects illusions does not mean they are errors. An illusion can be functional. A horizon is an illusion created by perspective, yet it guides navigation. Movement, progress, and causality guide action within space-time. They are real within the framework, even if they are not ultimate truths. The mistake is to treat them as universal rather than contextual. When viewed this way, space-time becomes a narrative engine. It turns a static or complete cosmos into a lived story. You experience chapters, not the whole book. The story feels dynamic because you cannot see the ending. The cosmos may be timeless, but space-time makes it readable. Recognizing the illusory aspect of movement, progress, and causality does not remove responsibility or meaning. Instead, it shifts them. Meaning arises not from changing the cosmos, but from experiencing it. Responsibility arises not from creating outcomes from nothing, but from being part of the pattern. Freedom, in this sense, is not escape from the structure, but awareness of it. Within space-time, you must act as if movement and causality are absolute, because they are locally enforced. Outside that context, they may dissolve. The illusion is the price of experience. The cosmos remains whole and complete, while space-time breaks it into sequences that feel like change. That feeling is not a flaw. It is the mechanism by which finite beings live inside an infinite reality. Consciousness occupies a strange position in the structure of reality. It exists within space-time, yet it does not behave like ordinary objects that are fully confined by space and time. Your body has a location, a mass, and a trajectory, but your awareness does not feel pinned down in the same way. Thoughts have no weight. Memories are not stored as miniature objects arranged in space. Imagination can move instantly from the distant past to the far future without crossing any physical distance. This creates the unsettling impression that consciousness senses beyond the limits that space-time imposes on everything else. From the standpoint of physics, the brain is a physical system governed by space-time. Neurons fire, signals propagate, chemicals diffuse. All of this follows strict spatial and temporal rules. Yet the experience produced by these processes does not resemble them. You do not experience electrical impulses or molecular interactions. You experience meaning, images, emotions, and ideas. These experiences are not arranged in your mind the way objects are arranged in space. A memory of childhood and a plan for tomorrow can coexist in awareness without pushing each other aside. In this sense, consciousness does not obey spatial exclusivity the way matter does. Time also behaves differently in consciousness. Physical processes unfold at fixed rates, but subjective time stretches and compresses. A minute of fear can feel like an hour. An hour of deep focus can vanish in what feels like seconds. Memory collapses years into a single feeling. Anticipation brings the future emotionally into the present. Consciousness does not experience time as a uniform flow, even though the brain operates within one. This suggests that while consciousness is correlated with space-time processes, It is not experienced as being fully governed by them. This difference becomes especially clear when considering how consciousness handles absence. You can think about things that are not present, no longer exist, or have never existed. You can imagine impossible worlds, alternate histories, and abstract concepts with no physical location. Spacetime only allows what exists here and now, but consciousness routinely steps outside that constraint. It is aware of non-presence as easily as presence. This ability gives consciousness a reach that spacetime itself does not have. Meaning is another clue. Meaning is not a physical property like mass or charge. It does not occupy space or persist through time in the same way objects do. Yet meaning dominates conscious experience. A sentence written centuries ago can affect you immediately. A symbol can carry significance far beyond its physical form. Meaning ignores distance and duration. Spacetime does not erase it the way it erases physical signals. Consciousness seems able to connect with patterns that are not bound to a specific moment or place. This has led many thinkers to suspect that consciousness is not simply located in spacetime the way objects are. It may arise from spacetime-bound processes, but it points beyond them. When you are aware of a thought, you are not aware of its location. You are aware of its content. Content is not spatial, it is relational. It exists in terms of what it refers to, not where it is. This relational nature allows consciousness to bridge gaps that spacetime enforces elsewhere. Even the sense of self reflects this. You experience yourself as the same I across many moments and places. Your body changes, your thoughts change, your circumstances change, yet there is a continuity that does not seem to be reducible to a specific physical component. That continuity is not spread out in space. It is not stored in a single moment. It feels more like a point of view than a thing. Spacetime accommodates this continuity, but does not explain it fully. Dreams and altered states further loosen spacetime's grip. In dreams, you can move without traveling, change scenes without transition, and experience events without clear temporal order. The brain is still active in spacetime, but consciousness is no longer tightly synchronized with external space and time. This shows that the rigid structure of waking experience is not required for consciousness to function. It is required for interaction with the physical world, but not for awareness itself. This does not mean consciousness is magical or separate from the physical universe. It means that its mode of existence is different. Consciousness may be an emergent phenomenon that reflects deeper aspects of reality than spacetime alone. Just as spacetime may emerge from more fundamental structures, consciousness may tap into patterns that are not fully captured by spatial or temporal description. It may be sensitive to the same deeper order that physics struggles to describe beneath spacetime. If spacetime is a prison, consciousness may be the window. Not a way out, but a way of sensing that there is more than the walls. Through thought, memory, imagination, and understanding, consciousness reaches toward the whole rather than remaining trapped in the local. You cannot physically leave spacetime, but you can intellectually and experientially sense that it is not all that exists. This sensing has consequences. It is why humans ask questions that go beyond survival. It is why we seek truth, beauty, and meaning even when they offer no immediate advantage. Consciousness is not satisfied with the local and the immediate. It strains toward the global and the timeless. This strain suggests that consciousness is oriented toward the cosmos as a whole, not just toward the space-time slice it inhabits. At the same time, consciousness is still constrained. You cannot know everything at once. You cannot hold infinite understanding. You cannot escape uncertainty. Consciousness may sense beyond spacetime, but it does so imperfectly. It gestures toward the infinite without grasping it. This mirrors the broader theme: the cosmos may be limitless, but experience remains finite. Understanding consciousness this way changes how confinement is viewed. The prison of spacetime is not absolute darkness. It has openings. Consciousness does not break the bars, but it reveals that the bars are not the whole of reality. It shows that what is most important to experience, meaning, understanding, awareness, does not fit neatly inside spacetime's dimensions. In this sense, consciousness is evidence that spacetime is not fundamental enough to account for everything that matters. It is part of reality, but not the whole of it. Consciousness feels at home in a cosmos that may be deeper, richer, and more interconnected than spacetime allows us to see. And even while living inside the prison, consciousness continues to sense the vastness beyond it, reminding us that confinement is a condition of experience, not a definition of existence. Freedom is usually imagined as movement without restriction, choice without consequence, or existence without limits. But if spacetime itself functions as a prison, then freedom cannot mean escape in any literal sense. Nothing inside spacetime can step outside it. No object can outrun time, no signal can bypass distance, no body can ignore gravity. If freedom exists at all under these conditions, it must be redefined. It cannot be spatial or temporal freedom. It must be something deeper, something that does not rely on breaking the rules of spacetime, but on understanding their place in reality. If spacetime is not fundamental, then its rules are not ultimate. They are conditions, not absolutes. This alone changes the meaning of freedom. To believe spacetime is all that exists is to believe that confinement is final. But if spacetime is an emergent framework inside a larger cosmic reality, then confinement is local, not total. Freedom would not mean escaping spacetime, but recognizing that spacetime does not exhaust what is real. Awareness of a larger context becomes the first form of freedom. This kind of freedom begins with perspective. When you believe that the present moment is all that exists, fear and urgency dominate. When you believe that your current position defines your entire reality, limitation feels absolute. But if the cosmos is larger than spacetime, then every moment you experience is part of a much greater whole. Your life is not a fleeting spark in nothingness. It is a localized experience within something vast and enduring. That shift in perspective does not change physical constraints, but it changes how they are lived. Freedom, then, becomes freedom from illusion, rather than freedom from structure. The illusion is that spacetime's limits are the limits of reality itself. Once that illusion weakens, confinement feels different. You still age. You still move through time. You still obey gravity. But these no longer feel like the total definition of existence. They become conditions of experience, not the meaning of existence. Another dimension of freedom appears in how meaning is created. If spacetime is not fundamental, then meaning is not derived from outcomes alone. It is not measured only by what changes in the physical world. Meaning arises from understanding intention and awareness. These are not spatial achievements. They are internal alignments. A person confined to a small space can possess greater freedom of meaning than someone with vast physical mobility, but no understanding. This suggests that freedom operates on a level spacetime cannot fully contain. Choice also takes on a different character. Within spacetime, choices feel like forks in a road leading to different futures. This creates anxiety and attachment to outcomes. But if the cosmos already contains all moments, then choice is not about creating reality from nothing. It is about participating in a particular path through what already exists. Freedom is not control over the cosmos. It is alignment with the path you are on. This does not remove responsibility. It deepens it. Responsibility becomes about how consciously you participate, not about forcing reality to obey your will. This reframing dissolves a common misunderstanding. Many people associate freedom with the absence of constraint. But absence of constraint would mean absence of form, and absence of form would mean absence of experience. Total freedom, understood as no structure at all, would be indistinguishable from nothingness. The cosmos may be limitless, but experience requires limits. Spacetime provides those limits. Freedom, therefore, cannot mean destroying the framework that makes experience possible. It must mean relating to that framework differently. Acceptance plays a crucial role here, but not passive resignation. Acceptance in this sense is clarity. It is seeing what cannot be changed and not wasting energy fighting illusions. Time will move forward. Bodies will age. Causes will have effects. Resisting these facts creates suffering without creating freedom. Recognizing them as features of a local framework allows attention to shift toward what can change understanding, response, meaning, and awareness. This is where consciousness becomes central. Consciousness cannot escape space-time, but it can contextualize it. It can hold multiple perspectives, reflect on its own limits, and sense that reality is larger than what is immediately given. This reflective capacity is a form of freedom. It allows you to live within constraints without being defined entirely by them. The prison still exists, but it no longer owns your interpretation of existence. Freedom also appears in how suffering is understood. Much suffering arises from mistaking space-time constraints for personal failures. Aging feels like loss rather than process. Change feels like betrayal rather than movement. Death feels like annihilation rather than transition within a larger reality. If space-time is not fundamental, then these interpretations soften. Loss remains painful, but it is no longer framed as total erasure. Endings remain real, but they are no longer absolute. This does not require certainty about what lies beyond space-time. Freedom does not depend on knowing the ultimate nature of reality. It depends on recognizing that what you experience is not the whole. Mystery itself becomes liberating. When reality is not reduced to what can be controlled or measured, pressure eases. You are no longer required to solve existence in order to live meaningfully within it. Creativity is another expression of this freedom. Creativity does not violate space-time, but it rearranges meaning within it. New ideas, art, and understanding appear without occupying new space or taking extra time from the cosmos as a whole. They arise from new relationships between existing elements. Creativity shows that freedom operates through interpretation, not through physical escape. Even love reflects this deeper freedom. Love connects across distance, survives time, and holds presence in absence. It does not ignore space-time, but it is not reducible to it. Love demonstrates that what matters most in human life is not confined to location or moment. It suggests that the deepest values already operate on a level space-time cannot fully imprison. If space-time is a prison, then freedom is not the breaking of bars, but the realization that the bars are not the universe. They are part of the architecture of experience. Beyond them lies a cosmos that may be timeless, boundless, and whole. You may never physically reach that realm, but you can live in awareness of it. In this awareness, life changes tone, urgency becomes presence, fear becomes curiosity, control becomes participation, freedom becomes understanding. You remain inside space-time, but space-time no longer defines the limits of what is meaningful, real, or possible. So what might freedom mean if space-time is not fundamental reality? It means living with clarity instead of confusion, with awareness instead of illusion, and with meaning instead of panic. It means recognizing that while your movements are confined, your understanding does not have to be. The cosmos may be limitless, space-time may be a prison, but freedom exists in knowing the difference.